The mountain was screaming. Elias Boone pulled his hat lower, the wind tearing at him, trying to rip the breath right out of his lungs. He was a man of silence, a man who had left the world of words behind 7 years ago, but he knew the language of the mountains. And this wasn't just a storm. This was a killer. He was following a trail only he could see, a ghost of a path through the blinding snow. That's when he heard it. The splintering crack of an axle, the panicked scream of horses, and a sound that cut through the howl of the wind like a razor, the high-pitched scream of a woman. Elias didn't hesitate. He moved toward the sound, a shadow in the white chaos. As he crested a ridge, he saw it. An overturned wagon, half buried, a single wheel spinning uselessly, and beside it, a woman on her knees, her arms wrapped around 4 small children. They were dying. He approached with his rifle ready. Tragedy in these mountains drew predators, and not all of them walked on 4 legs. But as he got closer, he saw the raw terror in the woman's eyes, the faint trickle of blood freezing on her temple. He felt a door in his soul, long bolted shut, creak open. He lowered his rifle and knelt in the snow, meeting the wide eyes of the smallest child. He shook his head once. No harm. The woman struggled to her feet. "The storm is getting worse," she said, her voice shaking. "We need shelter." Elias nodded and pointed up the ridge, toward the dark shape of his cabin. "You live nearby?" she asked. He nodded again. "You don't speak?" He touched his throat and shook his head. "Are you offering us shelter?" Another nod. "Thank God," she whispered. "The children, they won't survive the night out here." He helped them salvage what they could, then led them up the treacherous path to his home. Inside, he built a fire, its warmth a desperate prayer against the cold. He hung their wet clothes, melted snow for water, and prepared a simple meal of dried meat and beans. The woman, Clara, watched him. She saw the faded photograph on the mantle of a woman and a small boy. She saw the medical books, the battered doctor's bag, the old Union Army saber hanging above the fireplace. "You were a soldier," she said, "and a doctor." Elias just nodded, his back to her. As the children thawed, their fear began to fade. But Elias saw something more than just the cold in their eyes. He saw it in the old bruises on Clara's wrists, in the way they were traveling with almost nothing in the middle of a blizzard. They weren't just stranded, they were running. And Elias Boone, a man who had been running from his own ghost for 7 years, knew the look of it all too well. The storm trapped them for 2 days. Elias rose before dawn each morning, tending the fire, guarding them while they slept. Clara watched him, a silent, powerful presence who asked for nothing but gave them everything. "Why are you helping us?" she asked one morning, her voice soft in the quiet cabin. Elias picked up his slate and a piece of chalk. "Could not leave children in snow." Her eyes softened. "No, I suppose a doctor couldn't." Later that day, the storm broke enough for them to venture out. They needed to retrieve the rest of their belongings from the wagon. Elias took the oldest boy, Thomas, with him. The boy was barely 13, but he carried himself with the heavy burden of a man. "My father taught me to never show weakness," Thomas said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Before he died." He looked at Elias, his young eyes searching. "Mama says you were in the war. Did you kill many men?" Elias stopped and met the boy's gaze. He nodded once, his expression grim. "I thought so," Thomas said, looking away. "Men are trying to kill us too. That's why we're running." The story tumbled out of him then. His father, an engineer for the Silverstone Mine Company, had discovered something terrible. The company was mining illegally on Ute land, bribing officials, cutting corners on safety. His father was going to expose them. "They said it was an accident," the boy's voice broke. "A cave-in." But it wasn't. The mine owner, a man named Maxwell, had come to their house after the funeral. He wasn't there to offer condolences. He was there to find his father's notebook, the one with all the evidence. "He didn't find it," Thomas said, a flash of defiance in his eyes. They reached the wagon, and the boy dug through a small trunk. He pulled out a homemade cloth doll. "It's in here, in Annie's doll, Lucy. Father gave it to her the night he died. He said Lucy had a special secret inside." This was what they were running for. This was what they were willing to die for. As they headed back to the cabin, The sky cleared completely, and in the distance Elias saw it, a thin column of smoke rising from a camp no more than 3 miles away. He hustled Thomas inside and grabbed his spyglass. 4 riders, men equipped for a long, hard hunt. "They've found us, haven't they?" Clara asked, the hope draining from her face. He nodded and quickly wrote on his slate. "How many?" "Maxwell has a foreman, Jackson. He's dangerous. And a company doctor. Warren. He signed my husband's death certificate without ever looking at the body." The mention of a corrupt doctor sent a fresh wave of anger through Elias. Clara knelt beside her youngest daughter. "Annie, sweetheart, I need to see Lucy's secret now." The little girl reluctantly handed over the doll. Clara found the hidden seam and pulled out the small, leather-bound notebook. She handed it to Elias. "This is what they want." He flipped through the pages. Maps of illegal tunnels, lists of bribes, notes on safety violations that had cost men their lives. It was a testament to one good man's courage and a death warrant for his entire family. He wrote on his slate, "Need to move you. Not safe here." "Where can we go?" "Ute Village. 3 days. They trust me. I heal their sick." But as dusk fell, Elias saw the riders breaking camp. They were heading directly for his cabin. He moved fast. "Hide. Root cellar." He pulled back a bearskin rug, revealing a hidden trap door. "What about you?" Clara asked, her eyes wide with fear. Elias pointed at himself, then made a gesture of leading someone away. "I'll lead them off." He slipped out the back as Clara and the children descended into the darkness of the cellar. He circled around, watching from the trees. He saw them ride up. The foreman, Jackson, 2 hired guns, and a 4th man, in a city coat, who made Elias's blood turn to ice. Dr. Edmund Warren, his old comrade from the war, the man who had been with him at Antietam on the day the world went silent. The men kicked in the cabin door, ransacked the place, and then, finding the false trail Elias had left, rode off in pursuit. Elias slipped back inside. On the table, on his own slate, was a message. "Captain Boone, I know you're alive. We should talk before more blood is shed." Warren, his past had found him. He got Clara and the children out of the cellar. Must leave tonight. "Are you going to fight the bad men?" little Annie asked, her eyes searching his. He looked at this child, this innocent soul caught in a rich man's war. He thought of the promise he had made to himself, to never kill again, and he knew it was a promise he was about to break. He nodded. "Good," she said, patting his cheek. "Papa said sometimes good men have to fight." He lifted her onto his shoulders and led them out into the cold, starry night. They rode away from the cabin, his only home for 7 years, a place of ghosts and silence. But Elias didn't see the lone rider watching from the ridge, Dr. Warren, who had doubled back. In his pocket was a wanted poster, issued by Maxwell, accusing Clara Hollander of theft and the murder of her own husband. Warren watched his old friend disappear into the wilderness, a man he had once saved and a man he had just betrayed. The journey was brutal. They moved by moonlight, Elias pushing them to their limits. They found shelter in a small cave. The children huddled around a smokeless fire. "Do you think they'll follow us into Ute territory?" Clara asked. Elias wrote on his slate, "Maxwell is a desperate man. He won't stop." "You were a surgeon in the war," she said, studying his face. "What happened? What made you leave that life?" He stared out into the darkness for a long time. "Some wounds never heal," he wrote. By midday they reached a high ridge. Below them they could see the smokestacks of the Silverstone mine. Thomas stared at it, his young face a mask of hatred. "I'm going to make them pay someday." Elias put a hand on the boy's shoulder. He pointed to the notebook, then to his own heart, then made the motion of scales balancing. "Justice, not revenge," Clara translated softly. "That's what your father would have wanted." That night, Elias was surveying their back trail with his spyglass when he heard a sound. A horse quickly hushed. He extinguished the fire and melted into the trees, rifle ready. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was Dr. Warren, alone. "Boone, I know you're out there," he called softly. "I'm not here on Maxwell's orders. I've come to warn you." Elias stepped out from the shadows, his rifle leveled. "For God's sake, Elias, I served with you at Antietam. You saved my life. I'm not here to harm them." Warren's voice was filled with a desperate sincerity. "Maxwell has hired professional manhunters, the Blackwood brothers. They're tracking you now. They'll be here by noon tomorrow. They have orders to get the notebook, and Maxwell doesn't care if the woman and her children survive." Clara emerged from the darkness, her own small pistol now in her hand. "Why should we believe you? You signed my husband's death certificate." "I was a coward," Warren admitted, his voice full of self-loathing. "I took his money and looked the other way. But I can't have the murder of women and children on my conscience. Not after what we saw in the war." He looked at Elias, his eyes pleading. "Tell her, Captain. Tell her if you believe me." Elias looked at his old comrade, a man he had once trusted with his life. He saw the genuine remorse, the terror. He nodded. Clara lowered her pistol. Warren told them of an old hidden trapper's cabin, a place to hide while he went for help. Elias refused to split up. He wrote his own plan on the slate. "We all go to the cabin. I'll go to the Ute village for help once you're safe." They reached the cabin just before dawn. It was well hidden, defensible. After settling them in, Elias prepared to leave. "Be careful," Clara whispered. "We've already lost too much." Annie threw her arms around his neck. "Come back safe," she said. "Lucy says you're a good man." He rode hard, laying a false trail for 2 hours before turning toward the Ute village. From a high pass, he saw them. Jackson and 2 other men, who could only be the infamous Blackwood brothers, following his false trail. The deception was working. He reached the Ute village by sunset. The warriors knew him. He had treated their sick. They called him the medicine man who does not speak. He showed their elder, walking bear, the notebook. The old man's face was grim. "Maxwell steals our land, poisons our water. This white woman's husband was a man of honor. We will help." But just as they were preparing to ride out, a scout galloped into the village. A second group of riders, heavily armed, was approaching from the south. Maxwell was attacking the village itself, and at the same time, from the east came the sound of gunshots. The Blackwood brothers had found the trapper's cabin. Elias looked at the smoking ruin in the distance. He looked at the boy, Thomas, running for his life through the snow, the 2 hunters closing in, and something inside him, something that had been silent for 7 years, broke free. He raised his rifle, and a war cry tore from his throat, a sound of pure, primal rage that echoed across the valley. The silent man had found his voice, and it was screaming for war. The battle for the valley began with a single rifle shot. Elias fired, not to kill, but to warn. The bullet kicked up snow in front of the lead horse, giving Thomas the precious seconds he needed to dive for cover. From the ridge above, Swift Hawk and his Ute warriors fanned out, their rifles barking, pinning the Blackwood brothers down. "The cabin is on fire!" Swift Hawk yelled. "The others may still be inside." Elias signaled for his warriors to handle the fire while he and Swift Hawk went for the boy. As they moved down the slope, Thomas scrambled from his cover and raced toward them. "They came at dawn," he gasped. "Dr. Warren tried to warn us, but they shot him. Mama took the others and ran out the back while I drew them away." Clara was alive, and Warren had been telling the truth. Elias sent Thomas to the safety of the ridge, and then began to circle behind the remaining Blackwood brother. The man was a professional, firing with deadly accuracy at Swift Hawk's position. Elias stepped on a branch, the snap giving him away. The hunter spun, rifle swinging. Elias dove, tackling the man into the snow. The fight was brutal and short. Elias, fueled by a righteous fury, ended it with a single, disabling blow. He and Swift Hawk tied the man up, then raced toward the still-burning cabin. Inside, they found Dr. Warren, alive, but badly wounded. He had been shot trying to protect Clara and the children. His sacrifice had bought them the time they needed to escape. Elias followed their tracks up the frozen creek. He found them huddled in a small cave, cold and terrified, but alive. Clara had been wounded, a knife slashed to her ribs. "Jackson knows these mountains," she whispered. "He'll be looking for us." Elias fashioned a crude sled and began pulling her through the snow, the children struggling to keep up. But their pursuers were already closing in. The sled broke, and they were discovered. Elias made a split-second decision. He gave the 2 older children the pistol and told them to hide their mother. Then he scooped up the youngest, Annie, and ran in the opposite direction, a desperate attempt to lead their enemies away. The ruse worked. Two of Jackson's men followed him. He was unarmed, freezing, carrying a child. He was cornered at the edge of a frozen pond. "Last chance," one of the men yelled. "Give us the girl." Suddenly a shadow moved in the trees. Dr. Warren, bleeding and weak, had followed them. He brought a rock down on the gunman's head, knocking him unconscious. "I've had enough of death," Warren gasped. But his warning was dire. "Jackson found the others. He's taking them to the Silverstone mine." Just then, Swift Hawk and his warriors arrived, followed by the elder, Walking Bear. They had been summoned by a messenger Swift Hawk had sent earlier. "The mountain weeps fire," Walking Bear said, pointing to the eastern sky. A faint orange glow was visible. It wasn't a forest fire. It was the Silverstone mine. "Clara," Elias whispered, his voice raw. "She started it as a diversion." "Or Maxwell is burning the evidence," Warren countered, "including the witnesses." They raced toward the mine, guided by Walking Bear through an ancient secret passage that led deep into the mountain. Inside, they could feel a rhythmic tapping through the rock. "Blasting charges," Elias said grimly. "Maxwell's destroying the entire mine." They emerged into the tunnels just as the first explosions began to rock the mountain. They found Clara and the two children held captive in the assay office by Maxwell himself. "The notebook, Mrs. Hollander!" Maxwell screamed over the roar of the fire and the explosions. "For the last time!" "It's in Denver with the federal marshal," she lied, her voice shaking but defiant. "A convenient tale," Maxwell sneered, raising his revolver. Elias and the warriors burst into the room. In the chaos, the second son, Samuel, threw himself at Maxwell. The gun went off, the bullet flying harmlessly into the ceiling. Elias tackled Maxwell, ending the fight with two savage blows. The mine was collapsing around them. They tied up Maxwell and his men and began the desperate climb up the maintenance ladders of the main shaft. Smoke filled the air. Debris rained down. Near the top, a massive explosion tore the ladder apart, leaving Dr. Warren dangling over the abyss. Without a thought, Elias scrambled down and pulled his old friend to safety, repaying a debt from a lifetime ago. They emerged into a scene of apocalyptic destruction. The entire mine complex was a raging inferno, collapsing into a massive sinkhole. Ezra Maxwell's corrupt empire had literally devoured itself, but they were alive. Just as they were accounting for their own, a troop of cavalry rode into view, led by Colonel Gardner, another of Elias's old army comrades. Warren had sent a rider to Fort Collins before the final battle. The evidence from Annie's doll, combined with the testimony of Elias, Clara, and Warren, was enough. The governor and his cronies were arrested. The Ute lands were secured. Justice, carried in the heart of a child's toy, had finally come to the valley. 3 months later, Elias and Clara stood in a Denver courtroom and watched as the last of Maxwell's conspirators were sentenced to prison. That spring, on a piece of land granted to them as restitution, they began to build a new life. A life built not on silence, but on a shared future. Colonel Gardner officiated a simple ceremony, blessing their union in the new homestead, which they named Reconciliation. "I have found my voice again, Clara," Elias told her that night under a canopy of stars. "And with it, the courage to build, rather than just survive." "My heart has found room for you, Elias," she whispered, "room for a future I never expected to have." The silent man of the mountains, a man who had fled from the horrors of war and the ghosts of his past, had found his voice, his purpose, and his family. Not in solitude, but in the heart of a storm. He had learned that some wounds do heal, and that the quietest hearts can sometimes learn to sing the loudest songs. This story is a powerful reminder that redemption can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the truest strength is often the courage to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. If you were moved by Elias's journey from silence to salvation, please hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories from the untamed heart of the American West. We'll see you in the next one.